I came home to find my bedroom door locked and a stranger's shoes outside it. Not a stranger exactly, my daughter-in-law's father. A man I had met exactly 3 times at family dinners, who had smiled at me over the green bean casserole and called me sir, with what I now understood was performance. I had been gone 11 days. My younger sister had her hip replaced at St. Luke's in Portland, and she lives alone, so I went. That's the kind of thing you do. You show up, you drive 200 miles, you sleep on a pull-out sofa, you make sure someone has meals and gets to her follow-up appointments and doesn't fall getting to the bathroom at 2 in the morning. My son knew where I was. My daughter-in-law knew. I had called on day 4 and again on day 8, and both times she answered the phone warm and said everything was fine, just fine, don't worry about a thing. I stood in the hallway of my own house, the house I have owned for 22 years, the house I bought when my wife was still alive, the house I have paid the mortgage on and the taxes on and the insurance on every single month. And I looked at those shoes and I felt something go very quiet inside me. My son came around the corner from the kitchen. He had a coffee mug in his hand and an expression on his face that I recognized. It was the look he used when he was 12 and had broken something and had already rehearsed the explanation. "Dad," he said, "I need to talk to you." "Whose shoes are those?" He set the mug down on the hallway table. Not a coaster, just the wood, which his mother would have said something about. Sandra's dad needed a place to stay. It was kind of a sudden thing. His apartment situation fell apart and we didn't have a lot of time to. "That's my room. We moved your things. You have the guest room. It's actually really comfortable in there. We put new sheets on and—" "That's my room," I said again, "in my house." He looked at the floor. "Dad, come on. Let's not make this a big thing." I did not raise my voice. I have learned over 63 years of living that raising your voice in a moment like that costs you something and gives the other person an excuse. I picked up my bag from where I'd set it by the door, walked past him down the hall, and pushed open the guest room door. My clothes were in a plastic storage bin. The kind you put seasonal decorations in. The lid wasn't even on straight. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, which was comfortable. He was right about that. It was a good mattress. And I looked at that bin, and I thought about my wife, Rebecca. She died 6 years ago, February, and after she was gone, the hardest part of being in this house was that everything in it still held the shape of her. The bedroom especially. Her reading lamp was still on her side. Her cross-stitch of a cardinal was still on the wall above the dresser. I had not moved those things because I was not ready to, and this was my house, and I had the right to not be ready. Those things were now in a storage bin with a lid that didn't fit right. I did not go out and start a fight. Not that night. I went to bed in the guest room and I looked at the ceiling and I thought very carefully about what I knew and what I needed to do next. What I knew. The house was mine. I had bought it in 1999 with Rebecca, and when she passed it came to me outright. No mortgage remaining. I paid it off in 2018. My name and only my name was on the deed. I had a folder in my filing cabinet, the gray one, second drawer, with the deed, the title, insurance, every property tax receipt going back 15 years. I am an organized man. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer, and organization is not a preference for me, it is a reflex. What I needed to do next, talk to someone who wasn't inside this house. In the morning I called my friend Ted. We've known each other since we worked the same highway project in '94, and he retired a few years before I did, and now he builds furniture in his garage and pretends he doesn't love it. He answered on the second ring. "Someone moved into your bedroom," he said when I'd told him. "In your house." "Yes." "And your son thinks this is acceptable." He presented it that way. There was a pause. "You need to call an attorney." That's what I was thinking. Call one today, not tomorrow. I called one that afternoon. Her name was Patricia Holt, a real estate and property attorney in town, referred to me by Ted's brother-in-law who had used her for a landlord dispute. She was direct in a way I appreciated. She asked me the relevant questions. Was I on the deed? Was the property in my name alone? Had I signed anything recently? And when I answered yes, and absolutely not, she said, "Mr. Calloway, you are the legal owner of that property. Anyone residing there without your consent is there at your permission only, and you may revoke that permission." "My son lives there," I said. "He and his wife moved in 2 years ago to help with expenses after I had a minor cardiac event. We had a verbal agreement." "Is there a lease?" "No." "Then they are guests. Licenses, legally speaking. That includes any additional person they've invited in." She paused. "I want to be clear with you about the process because it does take some time legally, but your position is very strong. I'd like you to come in." I went in the next morning. What I had not understood before that meeting was how thoroughly my daughter-in-law had been thinking ahead. Patricia walked me through what she'd found in a preliminary search. Sandra, my daughter-in-law, who I'd thought of as a decent enough woman if a little cold, had apparently been asking questions. Her father, a man named Victor, had been served an eviction notice at his apartment in Tacoma for non-payment. That much I pieced together from what my son let slip over the next few days, more than he meant to. Victor needed a place by the end of the month. Sandra had decided the solution was my bedroom. There had been no conversation, no request. They had simply waited until I was 200 miles away caring for my sister, and they had moved my things into a bin and moved her father into my room. My son, when I tried to talk to him the second day, said, "Dad, it's just temporary. A few months." "This is not a conversation about time," I said. "This is a conversation about the fact that you made a decision about my house without asking me. You were in Portland. There are phones, son. You know this. You called me from one." He had the expression again. "The one from when he was 12. Sandra said she tried to reach you." "She did not try to reach me." He didn't answer. That was the moment I understood something about my son that I had been soft-pedaling in my own mind for a while. He is not a bad man, but he had spent 2 years in this house, letting his wife gradually become the authority on what happened in it. And somewhere in that process, he had started to think of my presence as something to be managed rather than respected. I don't say that with cruelty. I say it because it is true and I needed to see it clearly. I started sleeping with my filing cabinet key on my keyring. Victor himself I saw mostly in the mornings. He would come out of my room. I could not stop thinking of it as my room because it was, in a bathrobe, help himself to coffee, sit at my kitchen table and read something on his phone. He was a heavy-set man, maybe 68 or 69, with a gray beard and the manner of someone who had spent a long time being taken care of. He nodded at me the first morning. I nodded back. We did not speak. The second week, Sandra came to find me in the guest room. She knocked, which surprised me. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and said, "I know you're upset." "I'm not upset," I said. "I'm clear. My dad didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have a choice." "You had a choice about which room." She looked at me for a moment. "The guest room is perfectly." "Sandra." I said her name the way I used to say my son's name when he was being dishonest with himself. "I'm going to need you to understand something. This is my house. I have the deed. I have the title. I have every document going back to the day I signed. I have an attorney. And the conversation I am currently having with that attorney involves the word unlawful. I'd like you to think about that." Her arms stayed crossed, but something shifted in her expression. "You're threatening your own family. I'm describing a legal situation. What you do with that information is up to you." She left. I heard her and my son talking in their room for a long time that night. I could not hear the words. I did not try. What happened over the next 3 weeks was not dramatic. I want to say that clearly because the story of how I got my house back is not a story of confrontation or shouting or anyone calling the police in the night. It was a story of paperwork and patience and a woman named Patricia Holt who was very good at her job. She sent a formal written notice, a notice to cure or quit, to all non-owner occupants of the property, which included my son, his wife, and Victor. It was delivered certified mail, which required a signature. My son called me from the driveway after he signed for it. He was not calm. "You're serving us with legal papers, your own son? I'm asking you to correct a situation." "Dad, this is insane. We live here." "You live here because I invited you to live here. That is a different thing than owning the place." "Where are we supposed to go?" "That," I said, "is a question you should have asked before you moved someone into my bedroom without asking me." He hung up. I went back inside and I made myself a sandwich and I sat at my kitchen table, which I had bought at an estate sale in 2004, which had scratches from years of family dinners on it, which was mine, and I ate it. Victor knocked on the kitchen doorframe about 20 minutes later. I looked up. He came in slowly, the way you move when you're not sure of your welcome, and he sat down across from me. He had changed out of the bathrobe. He was wearing actual clothes, which I noted. "I heard what happened," he said, "with the papers." "All right. I want you to know." He stopped, rubbed the side of his face. "I didn't know it went down like this. Sandra told me you'd offered the room. Said you were lonely since your wife passed and you wanted the company. I figured fine, a few months I'll get back on my feet." He looked at me steadily. "I'm not a man who moves into someone else's room without their knowledge. That's not who I am." I looked at him for a long moment. He had the eyes of someone telling the truth. "You learned to read that over 6 decades. "I believe you," I said. He nodded. "I'll be out by the end of the week. I've got a buddy in Renton who said I could stay while I find something proper." He pushed back from the table. "For what it's worth. Your daughter-in-law told me a lot of things about you that don't match the man I've been watching make his coffee every morning." He left before I could answer. The house cleared out on a Thursday. My son and Sandra took most of their things to a rental in Auburn. Sandra's sister had a connection there. They left some boxes in the garage, which I told them they had 30 days to collect. My son and I did not speak directly through most of the move. Sandra did not look at me. Victor shook my hand at the door. He said, "I'm sorry for the inconvenience." I said I was sorry for the situation overall, and I meant it. I walked back into my bedroom for the first time in almost 6 weeks. They had changed the sheets at least. My reading lamp was still there. They hadn't bothered with that. Rebecca's cardinal cross-stitch was still on the wall, slightly crooked from being bumped at some point, but there, I straightened it. I stood in the middle of that room, and I did not feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. Winning a legal argument against your own son does not feel like winning. It feels like arriving at a destination you never wanted to be traveling toward. What I felt mostly was tired, and then underneath the tired, something steadier. My son called 6 weeks later. It was a Sunday evening. I let it ring twice before I answered. He said, "I've been doing some thinking." "All right. I was wrong about how we handled it. The room. Not asking you." A pause. "Sandra and I have been talking a lot about what happened and why. And I think I let things drift in a direction that wasn't fair to you. I don't have a good excuse for that. He didn't have a good excuse for it, and I didn't offer him one, and I think that was the right thing." We talked for about 40 minutes. Not everything was resolved. These things don't resolve on a single phone call, not honestly. But something cracked open a little, the way a window does when you've been in a closed room too long. Victor, I heard about through Ted, oddly enough. Ted's neighbor turned out to know Victor's buddy in Renton, which is the kind of coincidence that happens in smaller worlds than we think we live in. He found a place in Federal Way, a good apartment, ground floor, was doing all right. I had dinner one evening with my friend Ted and his wife, and another couple they knew, and at some point the woman across the table asked me how long I'd been in my house. 22 years, I said. You must love it. I thought about the scratched kitchen table and the cardinal cross-stitch and the way the morning light comes through the east window in winter and hits the floor in a stripe about 18 inches wide. I do, I said. There are things you build slowly over a long life. A house, a reputation, the knowledge of who you are when someone tests it. I knew going in that I had the paperwork. What I learned going through it was that I also had something else, the patience to let the process work and the clarity to not let anger make my decisions for me. My son is coming for Thanksgiving. Sandra will be with him. We will sit at the scratched kitchen table, and I will have cooked too much food the way I always do. And there will be awkward silences and then less awkward ones. And at some point the evening will soften the way evenings do when people are trying. I have already bought the extra folding chair. It is leaning against the wall in the hallway where Rebecca's umbrella stand used to be, right next to the front door. I'm ready. The thing I keep coming back to is the storage bin. Not the locked door, not the certified mail, not even the conversation with my attorney. The bin, plastic, gray. The kind you stack in a closet for Christmas decorations. And inside it, my wife's reading lamp, her cardinal cross-stitch, 30 years of a life I had built in that room. The lid didn't fit right. That detail stayed with me longer than anything else. I think about cause and effect a lot these days, not in any cosmic sense. I'm not a man who puts much stock in fate or destiny or the universe settling scores. I mean it in the plain, practical way. An engineer understands it. Every load-bearing decision has consequences. You cut corners on a foundation. The structure tells you eventually. What Sandra did, moving her father into my bedroom without a word, without a question, while I was 200 miles away caring for my sister, that was a decision with weight to it. And weight, over time, finds its way down. What I did not do was let anger carry me. That matters, I think. There were moments in those first few days where I could feel the pull of it, the urge to walk into my own kitchen and say things I couldn't take back. I didn't. Not because I was being strategic exactly, more because I have lived long enough to know that the man who keeps his head in a hard moment is almost always the man who comes out of it with something intact. I called my attorney. I organized my documents. I let the process do what the process was designed to do. That's not weakness. I want to be clear about that. Some people look at patience and call it passivity. They're wrong. It takes more discipline to sit quietly with a filing cabinet key on your keyring and trust your paperwork than it does to raise your voice in a hallway, the discipline to think clearly when someone has wronged you. To choose the right tool for the situation instead of the nearest one. That's not something that comes easy. I spent a long time learning it. Victor surprised me. I'll say that plainly. A man I had every reason to resent turned out to be a man who, when he understood what had actually happened, stood up and said so. He didn't have to do that. He could have stayed quiet, run out his time, let the legal process push him out the door. Instead, he came and sat at my kitchen table and told me the truth as he knew it. That took something. Call it decency. Call it character. Whatever the word is, it was real, and I recognized it. My son is coming for Thanksgiving. That sentence would have seemed impossible to me the morning I stood in the hallway looking at those shoes. But here we are. We are not all the way back to where we were. I'm not sure we should be, because where we were had some cracks in it I hadn't examined closely enough. What we're building now is slower and more honest, and I think it will hold better for that. The cardinal cross stitch is back on the wall. I straightened it the day I got my room back, and I've left it exactly where I put it. Some things you earn the right to keep, and keeping them, staying clear-headed enough to fight for them the right way, staying decent enough that you can look at yourself afterward, staying steady through the part where nothing has resolved yet. That's the whole of it, really. That's the work.